On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Avielle. And Avielle was married to a critical physical abuser. It's a story of chaos, threats, being good enough, and shame. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today we have Avielle. How are you?
I am good, thank you.
Well, thank you for being here, and if you want to be a guest like Avielle is today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com and click on the guest form button at the top of the page. There you can read all of our instructions, and please read them all and either send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com or fill out the guest form and press the submit button, and please do send it in the format that we ask for. And there is a content warning for this episode as we do discuss physical abuse and sexual assault in this episode. So that is your content warning for today. And today you're going to hear Avielle's story. And Avielle, like many, had a very hard time leaving the abusive relationship, and there was also a big fear of losing her kids that went along with everything. Avielle has been through a lot, and we're just happy that she's here to tell her story. So now I'm going to get out of my way and your way. Avielle, the floor is now yours.
So I guess I will start with my background. I grew up in a unique family situation. My parents were teenage parents. My mom was 15 when she had me, and my dad was 17 at the time. And so their relationship was very passionate, but also very volatile and kind of chaotic. So with that, I kind of was raised by grandparents on both sides of my family. I lived with my mom sometimes, and sometimes I lived with my dad. But despite having these really young parents, my life was very paradoxical. Like, I was going to some of the best private schools. My mom made sure to put me in dance and swimming, piano, and I had a really solid education compared to my peers. When I transitioned into public school, I was sometimes years ahead of them with my education. And while in school, I did really well. I think I probably sought the attention of the teachers because my immediate family really didn't notice when I did well or not. Like, I would win history fairs, spelling bees, science fairs, but I don't really remember having like my immediate family being at those events with me. So I think that kind of plays into what later on happened to me with my now ex. At the age of 12, I started living with my dad and his parents. And then one day I came into my bedroom. It was the first time in my life I had my own room, but I came into my bedroom and there was a notebook sitting on my desk. And I was like a really clean, organized kid. And so I opened up this notebook, and then I found a note saying that my dad had committed suicide, and he left me like this note. And I went downstairs to my grandparents and showed it to them. I was very distraught, and they kind of just like shrugged it off and kept watching TV. So at this time, my dad is like being investigated by the FBI, and it turns out his girlfriend at the time was an informant, and she had set him up, and she also put this note on my desk for me to find. So I was pretty traumatized by that. I was like crying on my floor. And then all of a sudden my dad walks into the room like super happy. And so I was thankful to see him again, asked him about the note. This is when I found out his girlfriend put that note there. He was planning to avoid being captured, I believe. And so that's why they maybe set up this plan together, or maybe she did it on her own. I'm not sure. But it was only like a few months after he actually did then disappear. And I didn't know what had happened to him, if he was alive or hiding, or if he was, So it was just kind of a really hard time. with that, I also was like the older sibling. So I raised my younger siblings. The closest sibling I have is 8 years younger than me. So I early on, I was like changing diapers and alone with them for many days. With all of that said, I think that's kind of how I developed like some codependency issues that affected like the rest of my life. So after my dad disappeared, I met my high school sweetheart. We were on and off again. He was a really good friend of mine. And I became pregnant at 18. And eventually we moved away to Seattle together. And that was okay, but I had developed like a drinking pattern. So I would drink heavily at night. And he would too. And it just was a bad relationship. And one day we got in a really bad fight. The police came, they arrested him because he had hit me, but I had taunted him, and they arrested him. And my family found out about this, and they immediately brought me back to Alaska. So once I came back to Alaska from Seattle, it was my first time being a single adult. And so I was about 23 at the time. I had a lot of family support. My mom had just gotten out of rehab, and I was living with her and my grandma at the time. And so I just really started my life over.
So before we get to you starting your life over, a lot has happened in your life up until this point. You've lived more than one life by this time. A lot of stuff has happened. Drinking is part of your coping. What are the other coping mechanisms and strategies that you had growing up? Because that is traumatizing what has gone on. So, you're also now a single mom at this point. So talk about how you see your future. And did you have a different future? The kid who was winning spelling bees and doing well in school and all of those things. What was your future that you wanted then? And now, you're a single mom and, okay, what do I do from this point on?
Yeah. So actually, to go back a little bit, I did start having counseling at the age of 18. I went to a pregnancy counselor, and I went to my own personal counselor. And then at the time, me and my partner were going to a spiritual counselor. So I kind of had over a year or two of counseling. If you were to combine it, it had been about 2 years, but I did it all in 1 year. I started recognizing like some patterns, but the drinking thing, I believe actually happened after the counseling, because that's when I was 21, when I really started picking up drinking. When I was younger, though, I always wanted to be successful. That was just such a big motivation, was just to be the successful person and to have money and access to so much that I didn't have access to. Like, I grew up in apartments, and I just knew I always wanted to have like a nice house. Yeah.
So now you are back in Alaska. You're surrounded by your family, the ones that are there who care for you. Your mom has her own issues kind of going on, but your grandparents have been there for you always. You're getting yourself back into, how things are going in Alaska time. So I guess tell us about what happens from here.
So I came back, and I was just ready to go. I got a job back at a sushi restaurant that I worked at before I left to Seattle. I bought a car pretty quickly. I signed up for school, and I was like a beer girl, kind of. I would like do these Budweiser events or other alcoholic events and like serve alcohol. And that was like really fun for me. I really enjoyed doing that. But I always had like this main goal of wanting to be a real estate agent. And so I got picked up by a successful real estate company and taken in, and they helped me get my license, and I got to learn from a really, really successful realtor. And so things were going really good pretty quickly. Like within a couple months of leaving my ex in Seattle, my life really turned around. So then I guess this is when I meet my ex. So in February, one of my good girlfriends from high school invited us out for dinner and drinks for her husband. He was turning 21. So we get to the bar after dinner, and he comes up to me and he's like, hey, I have this guy I want you to meet, and was really persistent of he had like this Hispanic guy for me to meet. And although he had lots of friends at that dinner, I wasn't interested in any of them. I wasn't really trying to be in, I don't know, any relationship at that time. But I said, sure, I'll meet your friend. And so we're like hanging out, and then his friend comes into the bar that we're at with a group of people and kind of goes like off to the side. And so I'm just sitting there talking to my girlfriend, and a guy comes up to me and asks me for my number, and he was pretty cute, and I gave him my number. And then a few moments later, my ex came up to me and asked me for my number. I asked him how old he was because I knew I didn't want to be talking to people younger than me. I was like wanting to get into more of a mature relationship. And so he told me he was 28, but later I actually found out he was lying and he was only 21 at the time. So I did give him my number that night, and then he starts to like call me. And I thought that was kind of endearing because it was like this time of Tinder and people weren't really picking up the phone as much. So I like that he called me. The first time we talked, he brought up marriage and that he wanted to be married. I let him know right away that I did not want to be married and that I just got out of a serious relationship. With that said, he didn't say that he wanted to be married to me. He just said that that's what he was looking for. And he was military, and this is kind of like a stereotype that military men have in our town, is like they just quickly want to get married. And so he was like kind of fitting this stereotype. And I was always like warned growing up not to even date military men because of the history that they had in our town. It's a big military city. So one day I was supposed to go on a date with a guy that I was really interested in, but he canceled on me. And I was like, well, let me call this guy that I met at the bar and see if he wants to go on a date. And so I called my ex and we went to like a movie and dinner, and it was all right. Like I wasn't super interested in him, but interested enough that I was like letting him into my life. So I started bringing him around my family and friends. He felt like a really safe person in a lot of ways, and they really ended up liking him. He was charming, and he was like not afraid to say that he loved me. He was the first person to say it once we started dating, and that happened just like one night because he was like pressuring me to date him when we were out at the bar, and I said yes, but I remember not really like feeling that relationship. So a little bit of time goes by, and he calls me and he's like, hey, we're in a town away, which was like a town 6 hours away. And he was like letting me know he was with his buddies and they were going to go to like a bar. And so I kind of had this like, I don't really care what you do type thing. If you're going to go out, I'm going to go out. And so that was like the first time he probably cussed at me. A long string of words. Like, I can't even remember what he said, but I'm sure like bitch was in there, and just like the nastiest words. I had never ever in my life been cussed at like he had. And I was so appalled. We got off the phone. I blocked his number. I didn't talk to him for a really long, well, like 10 days I didn't talk to him, but he had already known like my family and my mom. And so he started reaching out to them to apologize to me. And people were like, well, just unblock him, just talk to him. And so I did, and he apologized, and I think he brought flowers to my work, and things just kind of like picked up from there.
When he brought flowers and, you know, he's calling your family, are you thinking, okay, I'll give this guy a second chance, like he obviously is sorry? But at the same time, in reality, you know, you really haven't known him that long for him to really say all those crazy things, those nasty things to you, you know, are you just listening to your friends here and like kind of, you know, you're not listening to yourself? Like your friend's influence has put you back in the spot.
Yes, and it was really my mother's influence that really got me. Is she had a lot of good things to say about him. She would be like, "Oh my gosh, this guy, he's so loyal. I don't know if you're going to find someone this loyal." And I think that's what really made me want to be in the relationship, because it felt rare. I had been cheated on in the past and I just knew like that feeling, and I wanted to avoid that feeling at all costs. And I was like, well, at least this guy's loyal to me. And there was a lot of passion in the beginning of the relationship. And he wasn't afraid to like compliment me or just say really nice things. So he was like simultaneously like the meanest person I had ever been with, but also like the nicest person too, because he was just like ready to give out compliments and just say things I had never heard people say, and like confess his undying love to me. And it was something I never received before. So yeah, my mom was like, she would tell me like, he's such a good guy. If you just protect his heart, he's going to be a great husband. And I think the word potential got brought up so much because he was only 21, but everyone's like, oh yeah, there's potential in him. And so I really hung on to the potential, and he knew how to win, especially the women in my family, like my mom and grandma. He just knew what to say to make them think like he's going to be so good for her. And so after that incident where his friends were in another town, I let him back in my life. At this point now, he's probably met all of my family. The holidays are coming up. He's met my son. My son and him really, they like each other. And then at Thanksgiving, he's at our house, at my grandparents' house. And all of a sudden he comes up to me and proposes in front of my whole family. And so, of course, I said yes, even though I knew I did not want to be engaged to this person. So the story goes, he went up to my dad at Thanksgiving, asked my dad for my hand in marriage. And my dad said, if you're going to ask her to marry you, do it now in front of the whole family. And by this time, my dad had been out of jail and he's back in our life. And so this is like the first year I've seen my dad since I was 13 years old. It turns out he had like escaped to Guatemala. Interpol found him. He was arrested for a few years, but then he's now re-entering my life. And I've known my dad as an adult as long as I've known my now ex. And so there was like a lot of aspects at play of why I said yes. But after that, there were many times we got in fights. I just was like not feeling it. I took off the ring. I really was not interested in this relationship, but I was at the time living with family. And he was also planning to get out of the military. And he had this bright idea like, if we get married, we can get money from the military to pay for our rent, and we can finally live alone. And I know how bad you want to not live with your family. And so it seemed like a decent enough deal. The thing is, I'm a committed person. So once I'm married, though, I'm kind of all in a sense. And so we're planning to get married. But I'd say like the first like physical incident happened a few months before the marriage. I was around my real estate friends. We were having a Christmas party, and I brought him to that Christmas party. Everything was good. I had my engagement ring on. He wanted to leave, and my mom's house is right down the road, where I was living at the time. And I said, okay, that's fine. Let's just take me back to my car, and I'm going to come back. You can leave. So we get back to my car, and he's clearly like starting to be passive aggressive about this. He would get really jealous when I was around like these real estate connections that I had. And he kind of like threw my purse at me so hard that like knocked me off my feet almost into the snow. I caught myself, but I looked at him like, no, you did not just do that. And he apologized, said it was an accident. And then that was that. And later, a couple months later, we get married in March. It was a really unplanned wedding. Like, we just kind of met somewhere at the local university, probably had like 8 people there. A lot of my family, I didn't even tell about it. I just knew in my heart I was not feeling this. But it kind of felt like I was being pushed in this direction. It was like my story was writing itself. I was kind of like watching this all happen, knowing I didn't really want it, but here I was getting married.
So you had this incident where a purse was thrown in your face. He says it's an accident. You really know the reality of what happened. How does that get smoothed over before the wedding? Are there a lot of from the messages he sent you at the beginning to something like this, is there a lot of calm that kind of goes on in between these events that kind of make you settle down and be like, okay, things are all right. This is okay. I can do this.
There was a lot of calm. He was probably on some of his best behavior that I got to see for the rest of the relationship. We also weren't living together, so I didn't see the other sides of him that I got to see while we were living together. Also, I guess I should bring up too, my ex, his mother died at age 16, and it was really unexpected and sudden. And after her death, his dad moved him across the country and very quickly got into a relationship with a new woman. And my ex would refer to himself as like a lost boy. And I did notice that pattern of him kind of moving, just randomly, is moving from state to state. And he had left his ex-girlfriend, the girlfriend before me, in Texas because he just decided to join the military and didn't really tell her what he was doing. So there were kind of signs that he wasn't emotionally all there. But I just thought I could help him in some ways, that I could provide this family for him that he didn't necessarily have anymore. So after we got married, we moved in together. Very quickly after we moved in together, I noticed he became depressed. And this meant he stopped talking to me for days. And I had no idea why. I would just I had no idea. I would try to talk to him. I'd be like, hey, let's go do something. Let's go to the town over. Let's go on a trip. Nothing. He would just wake up every day, go downstairs, sit on the heater, and not talk to me. And it got really awkward pretty quickly. I kept living my life though. I would still go have fun with my friends, go on trips. I don't know if I was communicating to people what was going on, because I had just gotten married. So I was all in. That commitment was a big deal to me. So I just kind of dealt with him giving me the cold shoulder a lot. So I was definitely drinking at this time. So at night I would drink. He would sometimes drink with me if he was happy with me, but if not, he wouldn't. And then he started being really mad at me for drinking, and really stopped oh, she's drinking, that means she's drunk, and I'm not going to take her seriously. So there's a couple times we got a fight while I was drinking, and he actually spit on me a couple times that night. And so that was really big deal for me. And I really didn't know how to handle it. But it would only happen when I was drinking. So I think I kind of was well, maybe I said something that I don't remember that I said. So shortly after, though, he stopped talking to me. I did find paperwork in his vehicle that said he had all of these medical diagnoses from the military. And I also found out he had to do drug and alcohol counseling, anger management. All of these things were related. The substance abuse and the counseling and the anger management was all related to his friend's death, because he started acting out in front of military guys I don't know if he did something at the funeral, but it kind of sounds like he like grabbed a gun and like just did something really strange at his best friend's funeral. So there's like these little things that were happening. And then like also in his diagnosis, I found out that he had like depressive disorder, social anxiety, OCD, ADHD, OCD. I don't think I realized what those diagnoses meant at the time. I just knew he wasn't really talking to me anymore. So he's transitioning out of the military, and from what I had learned, like this is like a really big deal for men, and this can be, or men and women, it can be really hard for them. Like they go from having like a set schedule to like having nothing. So I'm kind of like chalking all this weird behavior up to like military, friend's death. And then one day he just disappears, like moves out of the house. I'm pretty sure he left his vehicle and left all his things. I didn't really know how to handle it, so I kind of just ignored it. I don't even know if I was like calling him to see where he was at, because it had been so many weeks of him ignoring me anyways and me just really trying. So by the time he left, I was like not surprised, I guess. So one day I'm like checking the mail. He's still getting the mail at our old place, and I open up his mail and I see like his bank statements that he had moved to Arizona. And so I was pretty shocked by this and hurt. So I confront him. I think I call him and like, hey, you've been living in Arizona. What's that about? And then he also, his dad had died like a month before all of this in July. And so I kind of was like, maybe this is why he moved to Arizona. His brother was there, so he wanted to go stay with his brother. When I call him and confront him, he's actually really mad at me. I think he was in California for his dad's funeral, and so he screamed at me, and I was crying, like, how could you do this? Like, how could you just leave like that? But we get on the phone. I move on.
So it, you know, you're talking as if you've went through this like in stride, like, you know, you had a childhood where a lot of stuff happened. So maybe chaos like this is somewhat normalized. So are you doing like a really big freak out, or are you just like, I'm used to this?
I think I definitely have had some abandonment issues. So I think I was pretty numb to everything at the time. It really didn't hold me down too much. I quickly picked up. I wasn't really the type of person to like cry about a man or get too emotional. I didn't want to give any man that satisfaction of like my heart being broken, because it happened to me before. And I just knew I had to protect myself in that way.
Do you feel like that is maybe one thing, I guess, from your childhood to the relationship before this one and this one, that you really are protective of really letting anyone in it all, like going forward, in the sense of like, you've got your guard up, even when you're in a relationship with someone and you get married to them or whatever's going on, they're the parent of your child, your guard is up. You know, trust in things isn't something that you're giving away.
Yeah, I definitely. And I think that's what led to confusion later on, because I couldn't trust myself. Was it me not letting him in enough, and this is why these things happened to me? Or was this him? Was something wrong with him? Maybe I could have been a better wife. You know, there was, at the time I was pretty like not too in with him. Like, so I wasn't too hurt by this at this time, but later on it really did start to affect me. I could no longer push down those feelings, and the wall was forced. It came down very forcefully. So he's living in Arizona, but he calls me one day and he's like, hey, I want to fly you to Arizona sorry for everything that happened. I was getting out of the military. My friend died. My dad died. You know, pretty much letting me know he's sat and thought about some of these things, and he's just like really wants to make it work with me. And he also had like this sum of money. I still don't know where it came from. I think some of it came from his dad's death, but there is even more money that he had at this time that is kind of suspicious, actually. But he had never really had money when we were together. He was younger, so I kind of like chalked it up to that. It was nice that he was able to like buy me a ticket, fly me down, get the hotel and stuff. So I definitely took him up on it because I think I was trying to get that honeymoon experience back. And so I go down to Arizona. We have a really great week. So fun. When we were friends, we were like the best of friends. And yeah, so he knows I'm coming back to Alaska. I come back. He's like, hey, I want to come back to Alaska. So I'm like, yeah, sure, come back. We'll try this again. You know, at this time, I think we'd only been married for like 6 months or 7 months. And so I was like, you know, so soon into the marriage, let's like try a little bit harder. So he gets back to Alaska. We have a decent time for Christmas. He buys me a car, and I really need a new car because the road's here. So he bought me a car with all-wheel drive, and things were good. And then by February, the end of February, he was out of money. And so I was buying everything again, and I was buying dinners, everything. He hadn't had a job at this point. He was just living off of that random sum of money that he got that he never told me where it came from. So buy him dinner, and he just kind of gets like passive aggressive and like says thank you in like this really strange way. And I'm like, of course I would do that for you. And then that really upsets him, and he gets up and we start bickering, I guess. And it just gets like heated, but nothing too crazy. Just both of us standing up, going back and forth, and that's that. And I go downstairs and I separate myself, and I just go in the bathroom. I just really start crying because the same day my grandpa had died, and I felt like there was no acknowledgement of that. Like, why would you start a fight with me today when, you know, my grandpa died today? And it was just like kind of emotional for me. So I'm in the bathroom crying.
So, unbeknownst to you, while you're in the bathroom, your ex has actually called the police on you to say that you've caused a domestic disturbance. So, what happens from here?
So me and my son are in his room, and it seemed like 20 minutes later, I get a knock on my son's door, and it was a state trooper. They were talking to me. They asked me what happened. I told them what happened. They talked to my son. My son told them what happened. Meanwhile, there's like 4 state troopers downstairs talking to him, my ex, and they're kind of like laughing, having a good time. Like they're complimenting his tattoos. And I was like so disgusted because this was like so serious to me that there was police officers in my house. But he's just down there like getting compliments on his tattoos. And so the state trooper that's with me is a little bit older, and I feel like he kind of saw through what was happening, and they wanted to kick me out of the house, but the eldest state trooper was like, listen, she did nothing wrong. Her son's here. He has to go to school tomorrow. Let's kick this guy out of the house. And so they did. And then after he got kicked out of the house, I blocked him again. I was so traumatized. I was afraid for my reputation in real estate. I felt like he was going to keep calling police on me. And then I had a fear of police legitimately because I had seen my mom get arrested. In my life, I knew my dad went to jail several times. And that feeling as a child when your parents get arrested is like, I can't say it's like they died, but it hurts so bad. And even if they're arrested for a few days, a few months or whatever, it just doesn't matter. It just like really hurts knowing your parents are in prison. And so him calling the police on me was like really traumatic for me. So I kick him out of the house. Well, he gets kicked out of the house by the police officers, and he brings like a bag of his things, and then we just don't talk for months. At this time, though, I filed for divorce. He's emailing me. He's like, "Hey, can I get a ride to my new job?" Or he's like, "Hey, can I borrow some money?" Or, "Hey, I want to say goodbye to your son. I really miss him." And just trying to like pull on any heartstring that he could. But I ignored him completely. Um, I could also no longer afford the place we were living at because my income in real estate was not enough to pay for that rent for very long, or at least be comfortable. And so I had to move back in with family after that lease ended. So probably about 6 months go by. I'm living with my grandparents again. My son's with his dad in a different city. And so I'm just kind of feeling lonely. I felt like there was no closure on the way the relationship ended. And so I go ahead and I reach out to him, and I call him one night and I'm like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he was so surprised and so happy to hear from me. He tells me, and he makes plans to see me. And so I also go and meet him too. I was like happy to. I was very curious to what he was doing. I found out he had a job, he had a car, he had a place. In many ways, he was doing way better than he had ever done when we were together. And so I thought all those things were very promising. So I was staying at his apartment. So I didn't have to like stay at my grandparents' house. They lived like kind of far out of town. So it was nice to be able to like be at his house and go to work. So things were pretty calm. Like when we were friends, we were such good friends. I could talk to him about anything. And anyway, so days before my divorce is finalized with him, I find out that I'm pregnant. And in the marriage, we thought that maybe he couldn't have children because he kind of had like symptoms of diabetes. And so to find out I was pregnant was like actually really surprising. We were both really happy about that. So, like I said, it was like days before the divorce is finalized. So he wants me to like, cancel that. And so we go into the courtroom. I tell the judge, like, "Listen, we're going to try to make this work." And I always wanted like my family to be together. So finding out I was pregnant, I knew like I was definitely going to like put my best foot forward in this relationship. And so I'm working at a new real estate office at the time, and my boss, she has a rental property, and she really wants me to live in it. But it was kind of expensive, and I was like, I don't know if I could afford that. So she takes down the rent a couple $100s. The first day we go to look at the property, I go to show it to him, and he starts like complaining about it. He's like, just says how he doesn't like the windows being in a certain place. And I was like, "Can you stop? Like, this is the place we're gonna live in. Like, just be happy with what we got." And he freaks out, cusses at me, calls me a bitch, and just like leaves me there. I think I came in my own vehicle, but it was just like, it was like really telling. It was like foreshadowing what was about to happen living in my boss's home. I knew, like, okay, I'm pregnant. My boss already thinks this is happening. I can't tell her the truth. I can't go backwards. And I didn't want to go back and live with my grandparents. So I kind of ignored that. He was a really quick turnaround. Like he would get mad, but then he would quickly like, turn it around and be, "Okay, everything's fine." And so I took that and just, I took it and ran with it too, I guess. So we're living in my boss's house, and he starts working for like a really popular cell phone company. And very quickly they send him to Hawaii to train him. And it sounded like a really good job. So he's in Hawaii. He calls me one night after saying he was not going to go out and drink. He calls me one night. He's like, "Hey, I went out and drank with my coworker and beat him up so severely, like to the point this man, I think it just sounded so bad. Like I couldn't say like this man was almost dead, but it sounded really, really bad what he'd done to this guy. And the story went, he and this guy were at a bar, and this guy wanted him to talk to some woman. And then that woman's boyfriend came in, and this guy wanted him to drink more. And so once they got to the bar, he just like started beating him up in the car. He beat him up so bad he like took him out of the car on the highway and started hitting him. And then they got back to the place, and the hotel, and the guy was like, I just want to call my mom. I want to tell my mom what happened. And like that upset my ex more. And so I was like on the phone as he was like verbally abusing this man. And it was just really, really cringy. I really didn't know what to do with that information, but he got back to Alaska. They fired him. He avoided charges because of it being in a different state. And he started working at Costco after that, in the Costco deli. So here I am, I'm pregnant, and that happened. He starts like kind of picking fights with me before I have to go to work, or he starts picking fights with me before he has to go to work. So then he would get in a fight with me and then be like, oh, I can't go to work today because you made me so mad. So I kind of quickly saw like, oh my gosh, he's about to lose this job. And then I'm pretty stressed out. I'm pregnant, and I couldn't really focus at work. I could not get my tasks done. So I get let go from my job in January.
So you get let go from work here, and just to clarify to everyone, you are now working for a different firm than the one your landlord is from. But your ex's behavior and fighting has now affected you and how you function at work, and it's really taken its toll. And you told me that you're not really telling anyone what is happening, and that there was just a lot of shame that was kind of going on inside you. And now both of you are at home together. So what happens from here?
Yeah, so we're both not working. Holidays, I guess, too, are happening. Before this, he was always at my family functions, something we did together. He enjoyed it. But now this holiday season, he's supposed to come to my aunt's Thanksgiving dinner, but he kind of just like picks this big fight before we go. And I really wanted to show my family, like, look, we're together, we're having a baby, everything's working out. They kind of knew the past. Some of my family were not happy with him, but others were very supportive of him. Like both of my grandmas really liked him, but my aunts really like saw through him, and they weren't buying into this because they had known like, oh, he had already left her and he came back and he called the cops on her. So I think maybe he felt that people weren't really buying what he was saying anymore. So he picks a big fight before Thanksgiving dinner. I leave to go be with my family, and I come home and he's not there. And later I found out he committed himself to like the mental part of the hospital. So they kept him for about 24 hours. And that's kind of when I realized, like, okay, holidays are hard for him. He has no family here. He's really far away from the family he does have. His parents are gone. He's expecting a baby. And I was really quick to make up reasons like why they were so hard. But I definitely took that note, like, okay, holidays are going to be hard. And they were. They always got kind of worse in a way. But other than that, he was a very good partner when it came to like going to all the birth visits. He very much participated in the pregnancy. We were both so excited to have a daughter. Finally, the day the baby was coming, I called him. I was like kind of driving around, still doing errands, but I knew I was getting contractions. I knew she would be here soon. I called him, like, hey, I think the baby's coming. He kind of rushed me off the phone. But then I get home and it's really time to have the baby, I guess. So we go to the birth center and I have the baby naturally, and he like holds me during the birth and just was very supportive of like everything. And I think I really bonded with him during that birth. So first few weeks after the birth, everything was really wonderful with my daughter. He would like try to start fights here and there, but nothing like too crazy. And so that was like some of my favorite memories was just like right after she was born, it was fairly calm for a few weeks, but not for very long. I am back in real estate at this time. I'm going back to the old brokerage that I worked at before I got fired. I'm getting my own office. I'm becoming my own standalone real estate agent. My broker at the time was really nice to me. She like painted the office, got it ready for me. So all I had to do was like bring my desk in and just start working. And I think the first 6 months I didn't have to pay fees. So it was really nice. I'm bringing the baby with me to work. And that was kind of hard to do. But one night I come home and my DVD player that I was using to like watch seasons of shows at the time was just like broken in the hallway, just like smashed up. And so I bring it to him, I confront him. I'm like, hey, why'd you do this? And I couldn't even tell you what happens. I just know like a big fight ensues. And I would be the type to walk away. So fights going on, I walk away, I go sit in his car. He comes out to the car, he throws a glass of wine on me, and like that gets me pretty upset. But I'm not like the type to like screaming at him. Like I'm also outside, there's neighbors, there's people around. So that upsets me. Obviously, I clean myself up, and then next thing I know, the police are here again. And I am postpartum. I just had a baby a few weeks before. Police are here. I'm telling them what happened to me. And like he broke my DVD player. He threw wine on me. I'm getting emotional. The police officer at the time did not like that. He told me to stop being emotional. And that was upsetting. And that night, he had hidden the DVD player. I always think about this night too. It's like, man, if they found that DVD player, would they have arrested him? Because it's, illegal to break things of other people's. But he had hidden it. And sometimes I wonder if like those cops told him to hide it really well. Because later I found it like in a trash bag in his closet. But they kicked me out of the house that night, which was really devastating for me because I was like breastfeeding. So it was really painful. My grandma came and picked me up. I cried all night in my brother's bed. And I knew I had to get back to the baby as soon as possible because at this time he had never cared for the baby all night long. Luckily, I had like breast milk stored. So I get back to the baby. Things are okay. I find out that he was like texting my mother. He was like texting his sister how much he loves me and that things just got so out of hand. But I did recognize he had completely lied. And he was trying to get me in trouble. Like he lied and said he didn't break the DVD player. So I'm like, wow, like this guy is trying to set me up in some ways. And I just thought it was so unfair to get kicked out of the house when he was the one that like came for me. And I could not even tell you why he did. So a couple of weeks go by, I guess, and things are fine again. I'm taking the baby to work. My broker has a really nice party at her house, take the baby, we have a good time. I noticed when I was like around my real estate friends, I gained like this confidence. And I think he noticed it too. So when I came home, he had picked a fight with me. I stood up for myself and things kind of were okay. We get in the shower together and I go to like lean in and kiss him because I think I knew things were not okay, even though he said they were. And he just like really like pushes back, and that surprised me. He never really like denied my affection before. So I'm like, are you cheating on me? But I say it like so playfully. Next thing I know, he like gets out of the bathtub or the shower and he doesn't say anything. I take my time, I finish my shower. When I'm done, I get out and none of my clothes are in my room. So I see in the living room, he had thrown like every piece of clothing I had, every photo album, jewelry, makeup. He just made, there's like 8 piles in the living room, all of my things. I'm pretty upset by this, very upset by this. And as I'm noticing all of my things just thrown into the living room, he goes to our daughter's room, takes her out of the crib, locks her and him in the master bedroom. And like I said, he didn't really handle her at the time. So this gets me going too. And I'm like banging on the door, like, open this door, give me my baby. And then he like unlocks the door calmly, which now I realize like he was just setting me up. So while the door is locked, he's like setting his phone up. He unlocks the door. I come in and I try to grab the baby from him. He would not give her to me. And so I went to go bite his arm. And then I think I back off. Like, I just know, like, this is not good. Me fighting for the baby is not going to help the baby. So I'm like, done. I leave. I go to the living room. I sit there and he calls the police. The police come. It's the same guy that was like, don't be hysterical last time, that kicked me out before. And I knew as soon as I saw this guy, who looked a lot like my ex, like they had the same stature. They both had like tattoo sleeves. I knew that they probably recognized each other. And so when I saw this guy, I was like, this is not going to be good for me. And it wasn't. I got arrested that night. I'd never been arrested before. So I spent a full day in jail, and that was the jail wasn't actually so bad. I made like some friends, like I just made the best of it. But when I got out, I felt so numb and I couldn't believe that had happened to me. But before I get out of jail, he goes to the judge and says, like, please let her out. We're having financial issues. It was just a misunderstanding. And then I get released. My sentence gets brought down because after that incident, he also like talked to the public defenders and he paid all my court fees. He apologized for that. He admitted like that was wrong. And so I liked that he did that. I was like, that's the least he could do. But I knew it wasn't a good situation. And after a few days had passed, I went to the women's shelter and I spoke to them about what was happening to me. There wasn't really a lot anyone could do. Like, my options were kind of like, well, just move out of the house. But I knew that mean like going back with family. I didn't really want to do that. I think I should mention too, the day I was released from jail, I came home and I was very numb and took a shower and just like cried in the shower. And then like when I was done with the shower, he like forced me into having sex with him. I really did not want to, but like I felt like he was like trying to like assert his power or something. It was just a really awful situation. But because of that incident, I found out like later I was pregnant again. I wasn't able to be on my birth control because I was in jail for a day and like that happened. And so then here I am pregnant again. So during this pregnancy with our second child on the way, I'm really not trusting him anymore after he had called the police on me so many times. And I start taking my children to my friend's house as like a safe house. And so we would go to her house sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks. But ultimately, I had no money because I was unable to work now. It's really hard raising a baby that's crawling in someone else's space where they don't have their things because they're always like trying to get into stuff. It's like a lot of messes. We didn't have like our own room. We were sleeping on the couch. And I really like wanted my son to have his own room and I wanted, to have my own space too. And so eventually we would go back. I'm also like calling his family at this time, like telling them what's going on. And they're very supportive of me. Like, they're like, you should leave him. But it was just so much more complicated than just leaving him. So go back to the house, kind of start staying there. I knew for my next baby, I wanted a home birth. And so he and me get like the bedroom ready. We spend a lot of money on like decor and making like a really cozy space, and things are kind of peaceful. The baby comes and he's a really good birth partner once again. Very great. At this time, COVID's also happening. And so things are starting to shut down. We're kind of like stuck at the house together. I had to go to like all the appointments by myself, in the store by myself now. And it just kind of really, in a way, we're like, we're more together, but also really separates us. Like now I'm doing more things on my own when it comes to like taking care of the babies, doctor's appointments. And he's just kind of staying at home. I think he might have had a couple jobs at this time, but nothing really lasted long for him. So I was in jail in July. By November, things start getting pretty toxic. And I think he realized that he could call the police and they would believe him. And I also had this deep fear of police. And so I knew he'd call the police, they're going to believe him too. And we're getting ready to go for a trip to the city that's like 6 hours away. And we're getting ready. I'm getting both kids ready, myself ready, the house ready. And I'm like, hey, can you just do the dishes before we leave? So I asked him to do the dishes. I go into the bathroom and he just like comes up behind me as I'm getting ready and like chokes me with one of his arms. And I like make eye contact with myself. And he choked me for so long and so hard, like my tongue, I bit the back of my tongue. It was like purple. And I was like, I couldn't even believe that just happened to me, I guess. And so I go into my daughter's room and I knew not to shut the door because he had like this really strange complex of me shutting the door. He would get so mad if I shut the door and locked it. So I knew not to shut the door. And so then he comes in behind me, like grabs my ponytail so hard that he like yanks me to the floor and then leaves and walks out of the room. I just did not know what to do. I just knew, I was like, I just want to go on this trip. We planned for the trip. Let's just go on the trip. Maybe if we leave this house, things will be better. And so we still went on the trip, pretty numb, but happy like that we did just to get out of the house, I guess. And I realized now, like anytime we had to do something, anyone's birthday, any big event that was coming up, anytime I had to transition my son to his dad, he would always just like start a fight every single time. So, and it's also the holidays are picking back up. So I'm like, okay, here we go again. So I start like taking, my son and the baby back to my friend's house again. But like I said, we always returned.
So at this point, things do get calm for a little, but then your son's dad, your previous ex, initiates a court case against you. So what happens from here?
Although like my life, no one kind of knew the life I was living with my ex. Like no one really knew how bad it was. But my son's dad had got a new girlfriend. And once that relationship started, I felt like they kind of came for me. And anything I did, like the house I lived in was too small. The fact that I was having children, like that was bad. Like they just came in this court paperwork so heavy for me that I felt really drained by it. I felt attacked by it. I had no money. And so I had to represent myself in this court case. And so a lot of my energy after I had my second daughter went to like fighting for my son. Anytime I would like tell my ex what was going on with the court case, he would just get so mad. So I learned pretty quickly not to let him know what was going on. So I began homeschooling my son, dealing with the court case. I started homeschooling my son because I had two small babies and I was really afraid of COVID at this time. And I then find out I'm pregnant again and things just like really start escalating with my ex. He would just like be like, get the fuck out. And I would have to leave because I knew he could call the police. And now I'm on record as the abuser. So when he would say, get out, I would normally get out. I knew I wanted another home birth though. And so I knew I needed to be like in my home. At this time, my mom had bought a really nice house. So me and my son would like go stay in her basement. And he just started being like so nasty to me. Like he would kind of come in while I was showering and just like attack me, like rip off the shower curtain, start screaming at me. Broke down so many doors of my boss's place. Like I did start I would lock the door sometimes if I was really afraid of him, and then I would like record the doors, but sometimes I couldn't because I was like showering or something. So at one time my boss had like 3 doors broken down in her house, or my old boss. And she was like a colleague though in real estate. And so I was really ashamed by those things. He would chase me out of the house like after I got in the shower and just like lock me outside in front of like our little kids. I couldn't even tell you like for what or why. I don't know if I blocked some of it out. I just remember like the things he was doing. He's calling me names, screaming. I would go sleep in my car sometimes in our shared garage because there's people that lived upstairs. So we shared the garage. I was like sleeping in the car some nights, sleeping at my family's house some nights, not really having like any stable home, which was really awful because I'm like going through this court case trying to prove I'm a good mom. But now this stuff is happening to me and I don't feel like a good mother at this time. And so I'm just like fighting so hard to keep things normalized for my son when he's with me. And I think that's why, like, when my ex would like get out of the house, I would just leave because I didn't want my son to see like me standing up for myself, because that never went well. So my ex, he would like call me like names, like piece of shit mom, say I was lazy, say I couldn't even bring $1 home for the family, and just kind of like go in on me. He'd make fun of my age, like, oh, you're 28 years old, you should have your life together by now. And like just like really like anything about me, bring me down. Like he knew my insecurities, he would talk about those. And like he just called me a loser so much. I couldn't even tell you how many times he did that. But so finally, I win the court case for my son, which was really great for me, because or else he would have had to move away. And I tell my ex, I'm like, hey, I want it. And he's like, don't come home. And so I was so confused by that. I could not even wrap my head, like, how can he not be happy for me that I just won this court case that I've been fighting so hard for, that I was my own lawyer and I went up against a lawyer and still won it. And I was just like really proud of that. But there was like nothing there from him. But I think he got more mean to me after that. He would threaten to like call my son's dad and tell him things about me that weren't true, but he knew that would like get a rise out of me. So after the court case, kept kicking me out. When I would return, I'm also very pregnant. This is probably the worst he was to me at one point. But when I would return, my belongings would just be gone. He would like take off pictures of my family from the wall. He threw away all of my photo albums from when I was a child. Any sentimental things, he just threw away in the trash. So that actually really affected me. And I sometimes could go and pretend like everything was okay. But when I found out he did that, I had a really hard time being okay with that. So I believe when I realized he did that, I just left. And he would hate that I would leave because he didn't have a vehicle. So when I left, it meant that he was like kind of stuck at home. But he also wouldn't let me take the babies with him. So I would have to like leave them. And I would try to come back when things had calmed down so that they wouldn't have to like see us fight. So it's kind of like going back and forth. It's getting closer to me having my 3rd baby. At this time, he's like sleeping in the room with my 2 younger babies. He's locking the door. I'm not allowed to like go see them at night. I'm not allowed to lock my door, but he's allowed to lock his door. When he was mad at me, he wouldn't allow me to pick up the babies, even though they like have their arms out to me. He would stand in front of them. He would text me like, I can't wait for the day that you go back to jail, and I will do anything to put you back in jail, stay in Alaska as long as it takes to get you arrested, knowing how much that affected me. And even when I'm pregnant, just like saying these really awful things to me. it got so bad that like in the mornings I would just throw up stomach bile because I was so sick with anxiety of how he was treating me. I I look back now and like I just had so much shame. Like my real estate friends, I felt like they wouldn't even recognize me. I had gained so much weight. I now had like 4 children, one was on the way, and I just felt like just shame. Like I didn't even recognize the person that I was just a couple years ago. I was like, if someone would see me, they would be like shocked I have so many kids. I was like embarrassed by that because I knew this relationship wasn't good. So I'm holding all this in. I couldn't really reach out to people anymore. Just like a few close friends, a few family members knew what was like really going on with my life.
So a lot has happened in these 2 years. Nothing is ever good enough for him. You have double standards. He's using a power play of being arrested all the time. It's everything's really like hanging over your head here. Everything's hovering. There's physical abuse, sexual abuse, intimidation, insults. You aren't being treated like a human being. And now there's about to be another incident when you go back to your shared home. So walk us through this.
I'm there one night and he's drinking, which is actually kind of rare for him now at this time. But when he drinks, things get really bad. So he's drinking, he starts talking about my ex, and I know like this is not going to be good. And I start secretly recording him on our couch. And he like comes over towards me and like starts to assault me pretty bad, like sexually, like tries to have sex with me. And at first I kind of like play along, but then it starts getting very like, painful. He's like pulling on my hair. He's like slapping me, threatening to kill me, saying he'll choke me to death if I don't shut up. And he continues to like assault me for probably about an hour. And I blocked out a lot of it. And at this time, like I'm 8 months pregnant. After the assault, I find my phone. I forgot that I was even recording. The phone just picked up like the audio of the assault, not like video footage. The next day I call my best friend. I tell her like I think I was raped, and she knew what was going on with him and she really didn't like him. And we kind of made this plan that I would like send her all my evidence when things happened, just in case he would go through my phone, delete everything again. So I sent her that. I shared that with her. And then time went on. I had my baby. About a month later, he once again is like this really supportive birth partner. But then about 2 weeks after she's born, I started to get really, really sick. And after pregnancy and being sick a lot, he just did not take me being sick seriously. He's kind of like annoyed with it. He's like, oh, here you go again. Of course, you're always sick or something's always wrong with you. So I kind of deal with it for a few days, but then it gets to the point where I'm taking like, I don't know, like 4 or 5 Tylenols every couple hours because I couldn't even like lay down. I was in so much pain. So on Easter, I go to the emergency room and they just tell me like I need emergency gallbladder surgery. And the surgeon could tell I had dealt with it for many days. Like it was so inflamed that they had to like cut out a bigger hole than normal because it was so bad. But that day after surgery, I just knew I had to go home. Not even like hours after surgery, I just knew I had to go home. I knew he couldn't be with like all 3 children. And so I asked them to like release me and I go home and take care of the baby. I breastfeed her still. And it's just one day after I get my surgery of him sort of waiting on me, that he like lets me know that he wishes that I would have died on that surgery table, and like slams doors, refuses like make me any food, just like refuses to help me or wait on me at all. And so that was kind of like a very painful moment of everything, just knowing like I had so many children that my body could like no longer take what was happening to me. I think it's kind of like my body's like cry for help. I was like, this amount of stress is not working. It is common for women to have to get like a gallbladder surgery after so many babies, but I really felt like the stress on top of the children is what did it for me. So time goes on, I guess. And just a few months later, it just starts to get really bad, I guess, too. It's like now the third baby's here, he's still keeping me out. I've reached out to everybody that I know how to reach out to, like VA, women's shelters, domestic violence hotlines, his family. Nothing's really like helping me get out of the situation, I guess. But time goes on, I find these messages in his phone of him like kind of talking to this woman, and I confront him about it. Very like nonchalant while I'm doing dishes. I'm like, hey, I saw those messages. He gets mad, ignores me. But then a day later, he comes into the room. He's like, hey, I want to tell you about this woman I was talking to. She was a catfish. I just wanted to see what she looked like. Here, let me show you. We stayed up all night, like talking about her. And I was just like kind of grossed out. I just really tried. I started prioritizing myself. I started going to the gym, started just thinking about what kind of career do I want to get into now? Do I want to get back into real estate? Like now my baby's born, I made sure to like be on birth control. I was like so done having children. He refused to leave the house. He wanted to be like the stay-at-home parent. In many ways, I felt like he was erasing my motherhood. But yeah, so I'm just trying to make plans for my future. I'm like, okay, I'm not pregnant anymore. Like I can get my life back together. So start doing that. And then he sends me to the store one day, first day of December, tells me to go get some groceries, tells me what he wants. And then when I pull into the store parking lot, he calls me. He's like, hey, where are you at? And I'm like, just pulling in. I probably left the house like 15 minutes ago. Gets off the phone. I go shopping. I come out back to the car and I get a text message from him saying like, hey, I filed a protective order and I am filing for divorce and I took all 3 children. And pretty much that's all it said. So I go back to my house and I just start calling friends and family, like letting them know what's going on.
Are you freaking out when you get this phone call?
Yeah, yes, definitely. Well, it was a text message too, and he refused to like answer phone calls after that. He didn't answer or respond to any of my text messages after that. After representing myself in the prior court case, I knew anything I said was going to be used in court. Not that I was like the type to ever like cuss him out or say mean things, but I just knew to keep it like pretty professional and just as unemotional as I could. I still was like, where are my babies? And like exclamation points. But I kind of left it at that and just started reaching out to family members for help. So my aunts hired me a lawyer in this after like having none of my children and having all this time now in this big empty house that usually they're at. I started combing through all the evidence I had. And even though he had deleted so much before, I still had so much from this stuff. And I found the assault video that I actually forgot about at this time. Completely forgot about it. And then I find it. And I knew this wouldn't be good for him. So in his court paperwork, he was saying I was physically abusive to the children and that I was doing drugs. And so I just really wanted to obviously get as much evidence to show like, no, he's the abuser. He's like, me being arrested against me and whatnot. And he really played that card so many times. Oh, well, she got arrested because she was violent, that I think he thought he could get away with just doing whatever he wanted to me. So about 8 days later, after him having all these children in some random place, he starts like texting me and he's like, hey, I'll let you come see the children, but only you can come see them. and just refused to like let me have any family or support there. I I do decide to go see the children one time on his terms. I get there and he is like just military regimen to me, like, oh, you can only do this, you can't do that, and just really letting me know what I could get away with. And I couldn't handle it. And he's like, oh, and you're gonna bring me my cell phones, because he left like his cell phones, I guess, with probably which had his evidence on them, but he left them at our house. And he's just like telling me all these things I'm gonna do for him. And I really did not like that. So I left. And then a day later or so, he calls me. He's like, hey, the baby, she's not doing well. She's weak. She's lethargic. And at the time, she was still a breastfed baby. And when I confronted him and his lawyer about that, he denied it and just straight up lied. I was like, no, she's not, but she was. And so he gives me the baby back. And she was not like, well, she was not happy. So I get her back to like health. And 20 days after he had took the children, we have our first court incident. I had submitted all of my evidence to my lawyer. His lawyer was like ready to go to bat for him, but he had no evidence. He didn't submit a single thing. Nothing. He had videos of like me crying that he told me he was going to use to show how crazy I was, but he didn't submit anything. And I had videos of assault. I had videos of him like screaming at me in front of the children. I had a picture of him where he tried to spit on me, but he spit on one of our babies. So I had like this picture of spit on my baby. Just a lot of stuff that was just really awful. So my lawyer like showed that to the judge. The judge was really like sick by my ex. Couldn't believe that he would take a breastfed baby. And he then got supervised visits with the baby. And then the older two children were going back and forth every couple days. So around Christmas, he starts being really nice. And he's like, here, I want you to have the children for Christmas, even though I think he was going to have them. And there's this storm going on a little bit after Christmas where the roads are really bad. He's got a big vehicle now at this time. And I see the big vehicle pull up in the driveway, even though he's not supposed to be near us or near me. Now I have the protective order on him. Everything just like really backfired for him, but it was my mom in his car. And my mom, someone that kind of drank his Kool-Aid a lot, is the way to put it, was just like, oh, look, he gave me his vehicle. Maybe you should talk to him. He's really sorry. He's really afraid of the video that you submitted. He's afraid he's going to go to jail. And he's just so sorry. All he wants is his family back. And now he's reaching out to other family members too, like my aunts and my dad, maybe my friends. I can't even remember, but he's just really apologetic at this time. And also what's going on is like one of my grandmas was dying, and I wanted to be there during that for her. And the only person I knew that could handle all three babies was him, because it was like the only person. Like, they're not afraid of him, they're afraid of other people, but I knew he could handle the children. So I let him know that he can come over and watch the kids while I go be with my family as my grandma's dying. So he comes over, starts like kind of sneaking back into my life. But I did let him as well. Like, I definitely acknowledge, like, I opened that door. I think at the time I was not ready to have everything just like swept from me, like taken away. Even though I knew like divorce would be good for me, I was kind of blindsided by it, and I was not ready. It wasn't on my terms. I wasn't ready to be like a single mom with these three babies. Like, I couldn't even go to the store with all three of them. And I couldn't really find people to watch them. Like, my family was involved, but they also just weren't. Like, some of my family members, I just wouldn't trust them with like three little babies. And then some had full-time jobs and lived in a different city. Then my grandma was dying. So some of them are like mourning my grandma. And what's going on with me is a lot of stress on the whole family on top of like my grandma just dying. And I really felt like the only person that could help me like put my life back to normal was him. And in a way, I think it was like a selfish thing. I was like, well, I can go to the store. I can still go to the gym. I can go be with my family. And so I feel like because of it being a selfish thing on my part, I felt like maybe I was like getting one over on him too. When in reality, it's just like pushing me back years of my life to clean up this mess that had already begun. Like we could have gotten divorced finally, but I chose to let him back in. So he comes back in. I don't really tell my family what's going on, but some of them start to find out. And he like moved to a really crappy apartment in a really bad side of town. And he was like, please don't make me stay there. Let me come home. And at first I didn't. But eventually he just like kind of came in and stayed. He also was like getting a big tax return. He's like, I'll give you some money, and started buying me gifts at this time, something he hadn't done in so long. He's also like, I know our lease is about to end finally. And I know my boss, my old real estate boss, she was done having us there. The police have been called so many times. Upstairs neighbors had reported him yelling. I don't think she ever knew it was like him being violent towards me. I think she just saw it as like both of us like fighting in a very like toxic relationship. And so I knew she was going to want us out of that house. And I didn't have a job. I didn't really have any options of like where to take these children. I knew I needed at least like a 3-bedroom house. And even that's over $2,000. I didn't have any income coming in. So he brings up this idea of, well, let's go to Virginia. I have family there. I have a nice condo waiting for me outside of DC. My aunt's going to let me, stay there. And kind of spins a story of, well, he's always hated Alaska. This is why he is the way he is, because it's depressing. He's not around his family, but if we move to VA, he'll be around his family. I've always wanted to move out of Alaska too as an adult. And so I kind of took this as an opportunity of like, well, let me do this. Like our family needs to stay together. Now I have like these 3 little girls, and I really wanted them to have like the family I never had growing up. And so I knew I would do anything to make it work in Virginia. So we arrive in Virginia. Things are probably good for about 5 days until they start getting bad again. And I mean, like, he is throwing away gifts that I got him for Father's Day or for his birthday, just blatantly in front of me. He stops giving me access to the vehicles and would begin to hide car keys from me. And so sometimes we would be me and one child, usually. He would take 2 with him, never really leave me alone with all of them. And sometimes he would leave me at this new condo for days, like 10 days at a time. He would wake up really early and then come home really late with the children. He claimed he was visiting family. Sometimes we just had like ramen noodles, and it was so hot outside I couldn't really walk anywhere. I had no money either. So I'm kind of realizing like, oh no, this is getting worse actually than it ever was before, because now I don't even have my vehicle. I don't have my family or friends to run to and say, hey, come get me. Or there was no one seeing what he was really doing to me. So he really got away with a lot more. I started hanging out with his sister at this time. At first, not really telling her what's going on, but she saw that me and my son would have to take like the metro places sometimes. And when she saw that, she would offer to give us rides to take us back to the house. And one time she like dropped us off at the house. He saw her and like scoffed at her and pretty much started punishing her too for even being nice to me and my son. So one day I go and hang out with his sister. I come home and all the doorknobs are taken off the doors, which was just like really eerie to me because this means like he can like look in the door while I'm sleeping, or he can, he has access to the doors whenever he wants. He started calling the police on me for no reason. So I would like, he'd start to fight with me. I'd be like, get out of the room and then go to sleep. And then I guess police would come. And so this happened like more than one time. So one time, the next time it happened, the police officers let me know. They're like, hey, I just want to let you know he called us on you last week too. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, you were sleeping, so we just left. But I just wanted you to know that. And the police officers in Virginia were much more nicer to me than the ones in Alaska. I obviously didn't have a record anymore. And I think the reason he was calling them on me just didn't make sense to anybody, even them. And so they gave me a heads up. And so then I got scared. I'm like, this person is going to kick me out of this house whenever they feel like it. So, or put me in jail, and I will just be in this new state with nobody, and I'll be in jail, and maybe my family won't even know. So I started really getting bad anxiety about it. So one night I called the police, which is so rare for me to do because I am so afraid of them. Like I have this complex, and I call them. They come. I tell them what's going on. I'm like, hey, he's taking the keys from me. I don't even have access to the home. Like, I don't have a key for that. He could kick me out. I have doorknobs. These are the things he's doing. And they were like, he's not breaking any laws. So there's nothing we can really do. But you can maybe go down to the magistrate if you feel like you really need help. So I knew I was going to be in so much trouble after that. And I go inside. He's on the phone trying to get me kicked out of the house. I call his sister. She takes me down to the magistrate. They give me a 24-hour protective order. I have to wait till he wakes up to open the door. Once he opens the door, the police kick him out for 48 hours. And I pack up me and the kids within 2 hours. I get like 10 tubs of my belongings and 4 kids, 4 car seats, stroller, everything in 2 hours. I go to the neighbors next door. I ask them for help. Thankfully, they decided to help me. I knew that would be hard for them, maybe. Like, I wanted them to know, like, they were helping the right person, but they didn't really know me. So I showed them, like, the protective order and everything, and they helped me. His sister and her friends, like, helped get us to, like, a safe hotel. And we got there. I bought tickets to go home to Alaska for everybody. Get home about a week later in Alaska. I realized that I'm pregnant from assault that happened right before I left Virginia. The same assault that got me the protective order by the magistrate. And I file for divorce. I get a protective order. And I really go through with it. With that said, it was like one of the hardest years of my life, starting over with all those children and then being pregnant. A lot of times I felt bad for myself, like God was punishing me. But it really was like the stepping stones to where I'm at today. And that first year was so awful. And I feel like I want to tell that to people, that it can be really hard that first year after you leave this type of relationship, but it really is worth it, and it does get better.
So eventually you do get divorced, 2023. Everything happens in that sense that it gets done. You don't talk to him really anymore. He's never met your child. So how is, your life with your kids right now? What have you explained to them? And how are you going about your own healing process? And like, how is everything kind of being that have quiet now to kind of figure out your life and you have a lot on your plate. So like what's been happening and what are the, things that you've learned from this experience? Because obviously you might feel shame, guilt, all of those things, and you're in this relationship. And as people say, it takes, on average 7 times to leave these relationships, and a lot of financial stuff was going on. So, how are you doing? How are your kids doing? And I know I was long-winded there and circling around, but there you go.
I appreciate that though. So like I said, that first year was so brutal. I almost thought going back would be better. But after sticking it out and really putting that space, like that year of space between us, and then also the physical space was like a blessing. I feel so fortunate that I left him in one state and came back to Alaska, because now he really doesn't have access to us. He doesn't try to see us. There were ups and downs where I kind of thought maybe it'd be better if I was back with him. I really wanted him to be a part of my son's birth. I asked him to help me choose a name. He didn't do either of those things. But I explained to my younger children, this is actually a really tricky situation, because I don't want them to like look at their dad as bad, but I also don't want to wait until they're teenagers to tell them the story. I kind of want to set like some foundation of what did happen to us, because some of my older daughters do actually have memories of him being awful to me. So I just try to explain, like, he wasn't a good person. He does love you, but he can't be a part of our lives for the things that have happened and went on. And they're much happier now. I am so much happier now. I am like back on track to like the person I was as a child. Like, I started back at school. I made the chancellor's list consecutive semesters in a row. I was part of a Students to Startups program and hired on by the startup. And I was one of the only students in that internship to be hired on. And I got like a project management certification. Like, I just started really excelling, and I'm starting to recognize myself from who I was before. But I really began taking this year for healing. I am shocked by all of the memories that come up from things I thought I forgot about. And this now, I'm on my second year of being separated from him. Now it feels like there's like a lot more healing going on. I didn't realize I was kind of numb before, but now like I said, I'm having memories of things. I'm trying to work on them. And so doing this podcast is actually kind of a way for me to kind of put record on things and where I am today. But life has been really good. I live with my aunts, and so I have like their support. They help me with the children. I feel really fortunate to be out of the situation and to be far from him, because I know some people have to like do custody. He lost all custody of the children. I don't owe him anything anymore, and it's very freeing.
And if you had any words of wisdom for everyone listening, what would they be?
My words of wisdom would be, don't forget who you are, because these people try to like erase you. And I just want you to remember who you are. And if you weren't so special and amazing, then this person wouldn't have came into your life to try to smash it. So I think that's something that really stuck with me, is just to be reminded of who I was before and who I am.
Well, Avielle, I just want to thank you for being here with us today, sharing your story. A lot of people are going to resonate with your story, and you gave people words and validation today. So just a big thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Avielle, for being here once again. And if you want to be a guest like Avielle was today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com and click on the guest form button at the top of the page. There you can read all of our instructions, and please read them all and either send us an email at narcissistapocalypse@gmail.com or fill out the guest form and press the submit button, and please do send it in the format that we ask for. Also at our website, we have a support group, so if you need support, join our support group by clicking on the support group button at the top of the narcissistapocalypse.com page. Inside, you'll see that we have Zoom meetings every Wednesday nights, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. We have forum boards for you to post on to get the validation that you need from survivors just like you. It is a wonderful group of people on there, and you can make a lot of friends too. So if you need support, join our support group today. And if you need even more support, please do visit our friends at domesticshelters.org. At domesticshelters.org, they have articles and resources to help you make sense of everything that you're dealing with. And they have every phone number, email address, and web address for shelters and agencies. No matter how big or small the town you're in, domesticshelters.org has it there. So if you need extra support, please do go to domesticshelters.org. And we have other friends of the show called Shelter Movers, everyone. And Shelter Movers can be found at sheltermovers.com. And what they do is they help you move all of your stuff from your home into your storage, and that includes your pets and livestock too. So if you're trying to get out of domestic violence and coercive control and you need help leaving the home, getting all of your stuff out of your home, go to sheltermovers.com. They can help you get all of your stuff into storage. And that's only available in Canada, and it's a donor-supported charitable organization. So if you need help from them or just want to donate to them, go to sheltermovers.com. And that is it for today's episode, for today's survivor story. So for myself and Avielle, we hope you have a good night.